Hello, damsels and knights. I'm Sam Godwin, and welcome to the 5th episode of The Late History Show. The Late Show where we talk about history with the ones who made it. In the previous episodes, we interviewed 2 Holy Roman emperors, an English king and queen. Today we go back to antiquity during the times of Rome's Golden Age. He is the greatest forgotten emperor. A big applause for Antoninus Pius. Ave, Antoninus. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
It's a pleasure, I'm happy to be here.
First of all, how are you?
Good, life in the afterlife is very relaxing.
Surely better than us. Before we begin, on this show we let the guest do a little introduction of himself to our audience in a few words.
Sure. My full name is Titus Aurelius Fulvus, Boionius Arius Antoninus, but most of the people know me as Antoninus Pius. I ruled Rome from 138 to 161, as one of the so-called 5 good emperors, ruling the empire in a period of peace and prosperity.
You are humble in this presentation. You are easily one of the greatest emperors of Rome. I put you 3rd in my Roman emperors ranking. It bothers me that you are overlooked by most of the media and people in favor of your famous predecessor Hadrian, and even more famous successor Marcus Aurelius. You deserve the right spotlight, and I hope we can provide it with this show.
Well, you see, I'm a boring historical figure. I was a simple man ruling during a time where nothing important or dramatic for the future public happened in the empire. My predecessors and successors simply were more captivating characters and lived in more interesting times. But it's okay, I don't care much about fame. I simply ruled Rome doing what was best for Rome and its people. I think I did a good job.
A great job in my opinion. So, let's talk about how you became emperor in the first place.
In the last years of his reign, the great Emperor Hadrian saw his health failing rapidly. He had no sons, so he had to choose a successor. There were few candidates, but most of them died before him. In the end he decided that his nephew, Marcus Aurelius, would be his successor. But he was too young to be emperor. Hadrian needed someone to be emperor until Marcus would be old enough and ready to rule the huge empire that Rome built. So he searched somebody for that role.
And you were that somebody.
I came from a wealthy senatorial family. I was consul in 120 and proconsul of Asia from 133 until 136. I proved my seriousness and duty to my work and the people of the empire. I had the respect of the Senate, which accepted me as Hadrian's successor in January 138. Later I also promised to be a mentor to Marcus Aurelius, teaching him how to run a state, and before I died, I would make him my official successor. Also I was fortunate that another candidate for the throne, Lucius Aelius Caesar, died the night before he would be heard in the Senate for his candidacy.
Another important reason for your ascension to the throne of Rome was your age. You were 52 at the time. For the ancient standards you were quite old. Hadrian and the Senate believed that you would live just some years and then die, leaving a more experienced Marcus Aurelius ready to rule the empire.
Yeah, nobody expected me to live for long. Instead I ruled for 23 years, the 3rd most longest reign among all the Roman emperors. I find it quite ironic.
How did you felt the day that you knew you would become emperor?
I didn't sleep very much that night. I felt the pressure of being the successor of an emperor like Hadrianus, one of the greatest Roman rulers of all time. All the work he had done to ensure peace, stability, and economic growth could be lost if I didn't manage the empire properly. I was also promising to teach a young Marcus Aurelius how to run the vast empire he would inherit. But I was the emperor's choice. I calmed down and said to myself, okay, Antoninus, you can do it.
I can only imagine the pressure you must have felt during those months. But your time eventually came. In the summer of 138, Hadrian died, and your reign began.
The first years of my reign were marked by a tragic event. My beloved wife Faustina died in 140, leaving a huge hole in my heart. But the empire needed me to move on, so I went back to work. By invading Caledonia, better known as Scotland.
Okay, so let's talk about the most important and only major campaign of your reign.
In 139, I ordered the governor of that cold and distant land called Britannia, Quintus Lollius Urbicus, to bring those barbarian tribes that were causing some trouble on the border under our rule and show them what civilization really means. He advanced with his troops into that wild lands and defeated every Caledonian attack until their entire southern territory was under our control. To secure the border, I took inspiration from Hadrian's Wall and ordered a similar frontier protection to be built, the Antonine Wall. By 145, the operations were over. The wall was completed, the border secured, and the process of Romanization began.
But it never ended. The land you conquered was abandoned shortly after your death, and the wall you built was quickly abandoned. Historians are still questioning why you tried to Romanize an extremely difficult territory to control.
You see, a successful campaign in the early years of my reign would strengthen my position as rightful emperor. It would also please the army of the empire, and those Caledonians were causing some trouble, so I thought it was a good idea to start a campaign. It will also send a message to Rome's enemies that even if my predecessor had a defensive strategy, we are still the Romans and nobody should mess with us. The campaign was successful in terms of demonstrating power. In the long run, the conquest was quite useless, but it's easy to judge centuries after the events, while sitting behind a computer. I needed this victory for my propaganda and to remind those barbarians that it's always a bad idea to mess with the Romans.
This was your only major campaign, as your reign was very peaceful. There were a few rebellions in Egypt, Mauritania, and Dacia, but they were all successfully put down swiftly. This is very outstanding for a Roman emperor to have such a peaceful military record. You probably had the most peaceful reign of all the Roman emperors.
Well, let's remember the context first. I became emperor at a moment when Rome was at the height of its power. Trajanus and Hadrian were two great rulers, securing the borders, and the empire was rich and powerful. My duty was not to waste all their work and maintain stability for the citizens of Rome. As for the peaceful reign, the answers are simple. First, I was not a military man. I was raised in a rich senatorial family, lived as a senator, and I never led a legion nor marched with the soldiers during my rule. Second, I took inspiration from the defensive strategy of my predecessor, Hadrian. I felt too that the empire was big enough and that there was no need to expand it any further. The empire needed an administrator, not a general. For all the years of my rule, I focused on managing the economic growth of the provinces, promoting art and science, and to improve the lives of the Romans, I began a massive building program. Aqueducts, roads, bridges, temples, and many other buildings were built in great numbers during my reign. But despite all this spending, I left the public treasury with an estimated 2.7 billion sesterces.
I don't know how much it will be in euros or dollars, but I think it's safe to say that it's a lot of money. This was your reign overall. More than 20 years of peace and stability, economic growth that will never be seen again, and many building projects. In 161 you passed away, and it was time for the already 40-year-old Marcus Aurelius to rule Rome. Unfortunately for him, the golden age of Rome ended with your death.
I don't need so much credit. I simply administrated a perfect state machine crafted by my predecessors and secured that everything was working in the right way. I was a simple man that worked for the interest of the people and to please the gods.
Before we end this conversation, there are two questions I would like to ask. It's true that, unlike Hadrian, who traveled a lot across the empire, you never left Italy during your reign?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I didn't take inspirations from my predecessor. I felt that my place was in Rome and the governors of the various provinces were competent enough. Also, traveling was not a thing I liked to do. It took a lot of time and wasn't safe.
The last curiosity is about your death. It's true that you died because you ate too much cheese?
Well, yes and no. 2 days before my death at dinner I actually ate a lot of Alpine cheese. Probably too much, since the day after I vomited and then I had fever for all the day. I was 75 and my body couldn't handle it. On the 7th of March I passed the empire to Marcus Aurelius and I died on my bed that same day.
With your final day, we arrived at the end of this episode. Thanks for accepting our invitation. I hope you liked the experience.
Yeah, it was a pleasure for me.
And thanks for your time, damsels and knights. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.